Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar today. First of all, thank you so much for taking out time and joining us for this session. I'm hoping a really insightful session, and you could also put in your inputs, any questions that you have. Please keep typing in the chat window, and our speakers would be able to answer them at the end of the session. And speaking of which, we have two great speakers with us today, very well-known names in the industry. I'd like to introduce them one by one. The first is Shirish Bapat, who's the General Manager for LRQA for Southwest Asia. Shirish is an experienced audit professional with more than 25 years of experience. He heads the LRQA assessor team for the Southwest Asia region, and he does IRCA-approved audits and trainings for quality, information security, IT services management, and business continuity. Our second speaker for the day is very own Shilpa Iyer from British Telecom. We are really glad to have you with us, Shilpa, today. She is the Regional Security and Regulatory Compliance Manager for Asia and India. Her areas of work include regional security and compliance, leading implementation and certification of ISO 27001 for 24 business teams across the entire region, data privacy, security behavior, and social engineering. She strengthens her understanding of these fields with accreditations of CISSP, CISM, and DCPLA. So once again, welcome to the session, both Shirish and Shilpa. Really thankful and glad to have you with us. And I hand over the session to you now, Shirish, without much ado. Thank you again.
Thank you, Pallavi. And good morning and good afternoon to all the participants who have already logged in and spared the time for this. Let's hope this will be very engaging for all of us, and there's learning for us too. This session, the way it is planned today, we first look at the security aspects, what is the good in it, the bad, the ugly. Life is always a mix of things, and that is exactly what happens to us in security too. So we look at that first, then we look at what is the current threat landscape and what are the issues that impact us. Then we move into security and privacy and how they are interlinked to each other. That's why I put that word there. Are they really conjoined twins? And then finally, we look at importance of implementing management systems, how it assists us. We'll also have a glimpse into the new 27001 standard that is expected. And lastly, we'll leave some time for question and answers. I picked this poster from one of the old Hollywood movies, The Good, the Bad, the Ugly. I think this presents us the reality that is there for us. So let's look at the positives first, or what is good with regard to information security. When it comes to security, we know we have a lot of practices that are already there in the organization which protect us. People in various organizations today are using the available standards. They are using ISO 27001 information security. They are using 27701, which is privacy management, 27017, which is security in cloud, and also 27018, which is privacy in cloud. Now, if you look at these standards, they all sit on top of ISO 27001, which is the information security standard. So that actually becomes the base. Other than that, we have trained professionals available and our people can be trained. We just now saw the introduction of Shilpa where she is certified to CISM, CISA, she's done a DLCP. So similarly, we have professionals in the industry who contribute to help protect and create an information security environment. In the current scenario, if you see, there is a lot of awareness campaign happening within corporates where we all keep receiving mailers on information security. It's not that we have to be information security certified for that. The same is true with banks also. Banks are sending us regular SMSs, information mails. So everybody is trying to push information security awareness. And the reason for it is very simple. It has become a critical aspect for our living because we all are IT dependent. We all are currently dependent on various tools, net banking and things like that. So surely need for security and privacy is gaining ground. We are also exposed to webinars like this, plus system implementation success stories that we see in LinkedIn and other social media platforms. So I think that is the good part of it. There are surely a lot of challenges, whether we call it bad or they are the challenges, but contextually, yes. We today live in what is called as a market of convenience. So products are designed around us or services to make it very convenient for us to do things. And all that convenience starts at the tip of our fingers from the mobile phone that we use. So everything we are doing through our mobile phone, that is where the real convergence has happened. And that is exactly where the threats can come in or the risks can come in. We are using scores of applications today. So we have a lot of apps downloaded. On those apps, we are also putting in a lot of information. We are putting information which is personal. We put in our email IDs and many other things into those apps very easily. And we give a lot of information because we want the services. We also allow the apps to see our phone diaries and pictures that we have. And also we should remember that all these new technologies are interconnected. So the data can move much easily. We are also registering everywhere with our personal information. Today, even if we go to buy something into a mall, they are asking for our phone numbers simply because they want to send in the bill through the phone number. So they are collecting information and data all the time. And at the same time, when we open the newspaper, we see that there are a lot of articles on fraud, money loss, identity loss. So there is surely a need for secure system. So yes, there is something bad or challenges. And the worst or the ugliest that can happen is when there is a direct attack. So we have deep fakes, which we see today not only on WhatsApp and social media, but they are all across the corporates. There is identity fraud being used where identity theft happens and then that identity is used for access into systems. Fraud today is available as a service. So one more service. I'm not sure if there is an app for that, but yeah, fraud as a service is available. There are marketplace scams today where sites which are attracting customers to log in, register to get some benefits and discounts. And these are exactly the places where they tempt you to give your personal information. And they may not be the best of the sites to do that unless you're able to authenticate that site. There is also a digital identity verification fraud, which is very common now because we all have a digital identity. And if that gets compromised, an imposter can be you into the system and gain all those accesses which you have. So we know this list is endless. And there are also very sinister planned attacks happening on government institutions and corporates. Uh, if we look at government institutions and we get into national critical infrastructure, we know today the dependence on power sector for IT with all the kind of tools that are being used and SCADA systems is very huge. The rail networks are also IT enabled with a lot of data being moved. Even the signaling system is dependent on not the word there used is not IoT, but similar kind of devices and signaling systems across the network. You have airport terminal buildings. We all know that today a whole city can be shut down or the power of the whole city can be shut down by a cyber attack on the power systems and the distribution networks. I personally have experienced this at one of the major cities in India, where I was at the airport terminal maybe at around 5 in the evening, which is peak time for people to travel back or somewhere else. And the systems were just not working. They were all hanged and they were not able to log in, generate boarding passes. And it took another 90 minutes for them to sort out. Now, surely, when this has happened across various airlines and the core systems were impacted, there has to be more than just a outage or something which went wrong there. So these are things that tell us that our lives can be severely impacted if these systems go through a cyber attack. So that's the kind of threat environment we are in. See, this is the landscape that we are surely aware of and also exposed to. We all know there are a lot of these vulnerabilities that are there across the various applications that we use, the various networks that we are on, and the user ones. The phishing one there is the most popular one, where most of the organizations are even simulating those attacks just to see the user awareness level. But it continues to remain the most common way of entering into your systems. We also have threats from various fraudsters, and we have seen the WikiLeaks case, which is all over the place, the terrorist attacks that can happen on our cyber networks. Now, while this is all happening and these threats and vulnerabilities are there, we also have various mechanisms like, say, cryptography, authentication, dual authentication, which we are using. We also have firewalls which are secured, and we are trying to make that network design more and more better. Our OS are hardened so that the attacks do not impact the core systems. We do secure programming. Like, secure programming has become an additional feature in all development projects now. At the same time, we have the requirements given to us in the various security standards. So where we have the triad of confidentiality, availability, integrity, and which helps us create a framework and understand which controls can be applicable, and also the various assurance tools that are there, and monitoring and emergency response devices that we use. So all these things put together create a balance for us, where we know while there are threats and vulnerabilities, there are mechanisms available, there are requirements given in various standards and assurance tools which we can use to balance the whole thing. So it is surely up to us how we go about this. So the security landscape is expanding. What we need to understand is when there is a security compromise, there is also an impact on privacy. So privacy becomes a collateral damage with security, So the first beans to spill are about people data, and that is what travels far. You can have a big newspaper news the very next day where people talk of people data that is being lost, and there is a loss of trust with that organization or that app. So in this context, data protection becomes very important because of the privacy of individuals is concerned. And information security is that way a very broad concept and covers the business, but and it need to protect the overall information that is there. Now, when we talk of privacy and it being a collateral damage, we know privacy is about people, about humans, and personally identifiable information becomes the first link. So when we say PII, it is that information which links to a natural person. So directly or indirectly, we can reach out to that natural person. And that is what PII is all about. And that is what also we need to protect. And going forward with the PII, we know there are two types of stakeholders or entities that can be there. One could be a PII controller and one could be a PII processor. A controller is one, firstly, the natural person himself or a public authority to whom the PII has, the person has given authority, who can determine what to do with that data or the personal data. And a PII processor who's legally or contractually bound by the PII controller to process data only the way it is supposed to be, and that there is no compromise. So privacy is about rights that we all have, and protection for that is about ensuring those rights. So we know there is a huge social angle to privacy, legal and social angle. So the social angle becomes very important here because we can damage a individual directly in this case. In PII now there are two categories that are there. It's very natural that one would be very sensitive, which could, when disclosed, harm the individual directly if breached. And this could be anything. It could be biometric information, it could be medical information, so, or the government ID and passport data and things like that. Anything which is sensitive and which can impact or harm the individual. Non-sensitive could be that which is otherwise also available publicly or in corporate directories or various websites. So that is something which is non-sensitive. Let us dwell a little more upon privacy. And to do that, I would like to hand over to Shilpa. Over to you, Shilpa.
Thank you, Sirish. Hi, everyone. I hope all of you can hear me. So, good morning, good afternoon to everybody who has joined in today. I'm privileged to be on this platform and talking about privacy concepts with all of you. So Sirish has already started off the journey. He has mentioned about digital identity. He has mentioned about the social angle of privacy. What I want to touch upon, and I'm cognizant of the fact that data privacy concepts, they have piqued everybody's interest in the last 5 years or so. And mind you, it is only in the last 5 or 7 years that this has happened. So many laws have come up globally addressing privacy of individuals. In fact, if you remember, a couple of years ago, WhatsApp introduced this change in privacy policy. And I think, hands down, that had to be the most widespread tech movement or migration in the world, from WhatsApp to, say, Telegram or Signal or other more promising applications which were more open with their privacy policy. Now, whether that decision was taken in a rebellion mode, or whether people actually understood what kind of compromise was happening with their data, we're not going to get into that today. But the fact that the topic of privacy of an individual being compromised, that itself sparks data today. And the worry that a lot of concepts that are very unclear to many of us today. So I will try and attempt to explain privacy in very simple terms, and why that hoopla on the social angle that that Sirish was talking about. Also, just a caveat, I know I'm presenting to an audience which has different levels of understanding in privacy concepts. It is still a very new concept to many of us, but having said that, there may be more knowledgeable people in this platform today. So if some of what I say is very obvious to you, then please excuse me, that is not deliberate. Sirish, next slide, please. Thank you. All right, so we start with what do we think what is privacy, right? So if we ask somebody randomly, and somebody who's not into this field, if we ask them today, what is privacy according to you? You'll get answers like what is there in the top dashboard, which says, say, maybe my health record, my blood group, my location, my postal address, say my identity, like my passport number, okay, my financial data, my bank account details. But in today's digital world, there may be other ways in which a person can be identified or has the potential to be identified. So personal data today is not the obvious ones that are visible, but they are also the ones that we leave behind every time that we are online. So today, all of you are tuned in today, you are all online, including myself. We are all leaving some sort of digital footprint to the already available profile of yours on the internet. And why are all of these considered as personal data today? Because using one or more of these data points, we can uniquely identify ourselves. Hence, that is personal data. So if you look up at the definition of personal data, it is the very identifiability of a person that defines personal data. Next slide, please. All right. So, Sirish touched upon the core fundamentals of an information security program, which is the CIA triad. Okay. And today we are going to see how different it is for a privacy program as compared to an information security program. So, what happens in an information security program? You have the CIA triad: confidentiality, integrity, availability. You map it with data, tools, processes, technology, and you come up with a set of risks. And to manage those risks, you come up with security controls. It is as simple as that. Okay. Now, we consider only the data part of it. We are leaving aside tools and processes and technology for the time being, because we want to compare an infosec program to a privacy program. If I look at availability, what is availability in the CIA triad? It means that my data has to be available whenever required. So you build in contingencies like business continuity plans, disaster recovery plans, and so on. What about integrity? You ensure that the data is left untampered. So you build in integrity checks into the systems, you build audit logs, data flows, you follow the data. What about confidentiality? Data has to be accessed only by approved individuals who are legitimate and authorized, right? Now, what about wrong use of that data? And now I'm talking personal data. What about wrong use of that personal data by legitimate users? For example, let us say a car insurance contact center employee is giving out his client information to a third party cars repairs company, or say a second hand car dealing company. Can our logs catch that? Probably not. So, this kind of protection of data is not covered in the information security program. And that is exactly why a privacy program is needed. In this case, what has happened is privacy of an individual has been breached. It has been used for the purpose for which it was not collected for in the first place, right? So, breach of privacy cannot take place only by unauthorized users. When it takes place by unauthorized users, that is below the law, it is considered criminal. We have procedures for all of that. But it can also happen by authorized users. And not only this, there are many other aspects of privacy which cannot be covered today by information security program. But here, I think in this slide, we're only trying to understand different risks to data and what risk is not covered by InfoSec. So remember, unauthorized use of data by authorized users. Okay. Next slide, please. All right, thank you. And so Sirish touched upon the digital identity. I want to delve back a bit more on this part, and so that you know why we are doing all of this. Why are organizations, governments, regulations bringing up privacy law? What is all that about, right? I want to get to the depth of it in this slide. So I'm sure all of you have heard this common argument, right? That we are human beings, we share and care, we knowingly or unknowingly share so much information with strangers on flights and trains or in our journeys, and we don't even blink our eye. So, why so much importance to my privacy right now, right? What has happened suddenly? So, for this, we need to understand that today more than three-fourths of the world operates on digital platform, more so after COVID, and with that the risk to privacy has increased. So for example, today if you're going online, you are creating a digital footprint of you, right? I'll give an example of, say, shopping. Shirish took out the same example. I will continue with that. So if you're shopping, in fact, anything that you do, say you are contributing to a social media post, you are subscribing to newsletters, you're leaving an online comment, your Instagram feeds, your preferences, your likes, dislikes, what movie you watched, what music selections you have, your vacation history, anything that you browse today online, and with every click of selection, that creates a digital you online. How you say that is happening? With all the IoT that is around us, right? IoT devices that we have. We have laptops, we have smart TVs, we have phones, smartphones, we have Alexas and Siris sitting around in the house and listening in on everything that we speak. Who has given the permissions? We have, right? We have allowed them to listen in. These are all basically listening devices who can listen in and process what you are saying. So coming back to the example, if you are going online to say purchase something or getting a service, you have to provide some basic information, right? Like name, phone number, address, and of course the selection of product that you've bought. Now what happens in the back end is that this data is traded with third party companies who may be advertisers or from industries which are complementing the accessories that or products that you've bought. They also get to reserve some advertising slots on the website. You may have seen this. You may have seen small slots, and you may have seen photos of, say, dresses that you selected on the some other day on some other website. Okay, these are happening through cookies. In return for trading that data, the original store gets paid. So you've heard this, right? In fact, when Facebook was faced severe flack in US Parliament about how privacy of data was being violated, we all came up with this very famous catch line, which said that if um, something is free today for you, then you are the product. You are the product for it. Okay. So this is happening to the ever growing profile of yours. That profile of yours gets fed into advertising ecosystems, and that is exactly how you get customized advertisements. We keep seeing products which we had browsed the day before. We see tickets to airline destinations about which we had discussed the day before. And I'm sure all of you audiences can relate to all of these spooky things happening, somewhere or the other. In fact, I'll give you my own personal example. Just last week, I was attending to some gardening, and I told my daughter that we need to provide some manure for the rose plants. Immediately, within 45 minutes, my Instagram started showing me one or two dealers of fertilizers, manure, and other provisions for the garden. So this is a loop. I'm sure you're getting it. The more the data you feed in, the more content they feed you. So what? That's good, right? I mean, you're getting customized products, customized services. Maybe you're getting customized news. Maybe you're getting customized opinionated articles, customized reasoning pieces that may cause polarized views. So once we start operating within these silos, we build in something that we call as echo chambers, which means that you will soon start seeing the kind of content that you prefer, the opinions that echo yours too. And that gets served to you over and over again to such an extent that you can't bear to hear opinions which are different from yours. Or you can't keep an open mind about opinions that can be from the other side of the story. A direct contrast of this, again, as Sirish mentioned it very beautifully, was, say, newspapers, physical copies of magazines, where you get to choose what articles you want to read or consume, but they are there for you to see, at least see and then form an opinion for. Now, that doesn't happen in the online world. It just blocks you out of that content and removes that ability for you to rethink and change your opinion. So now what happens when you start operating within echo chambers is that you start forming singular beliefs, singular ideas, and that manifests into turmoil behaviors in the society. In fact, many of the riots today, people's perceptions of celebrities, narratives of how a criminal case went about, they are all heavily opinionated, which we read, we consume again and again, and we also form similar opinions without trying to see the other side. And believe me, there is another side. There are another set of people who are being fed totally different storylines over and over again to create that rift in the society. So now is it scary enough? So if we really think that the privacy war is about a couple of color choices that we made on a product online, no, it's not. It is about influencing minds. It is about creating echo chambers. And if you are in a country whose privacy data is up for grabs, like a country like India, it has got 1.3 billion people, privacy data up for grabs by influencers or marketeers who can change opinions, then imagine what's the kind of harm that is coming our way. So that is the real battle of data that is happening today. I hope I've put through my thoughts very clearly. So next slide, please. So what can be done? Right? We've seen the problem statement. What can be done about it? As individuals, we can do very less except clean our own lawn. So practice privacy hygiene, give permissions to apps very carefully, be extremely stingy in giving discretionary permissions or dangerous permissions where they are not required, disable geotags wherever possible, disable those cameras and microphones where it is not required. As governments and regulators, what can we do? There are some privacy principles that I will be covering on the next slide that defines today's privacy laws. That is the basis for laws generation in almost every country. And they also define some data subject rights. Okay, so governments and regulators can implement strong privacy laws in their countries so that organizations such as yours and ours, which actually hold that data and process that data, they can implement a privacy program based on those laws, based on those principles, and based on the data subject rights. Now, coming back to the point, why are we saying we need separate privacy programs? If we see these principles, right? Today, if I'm giving my data to an organization, in turn, I get to enjoy some rights or rights over that data that you are holding for me. For example, I have the right to ask that organization whether I have given you consent to collect that particular data. Are you collecting that data to operate more than what is required for the service that you're collecting it for? Do I want to, if I want to correct my data, can I do that? What is that data that you're collecting? What is it exactly being used for? Can I delete that data once all that use is done? Is my data being shared further to a third party? Are these third parties further tracking them and are contributing to my digital footprint online? And is the data that you have on me being protected in your ecosystem? Now, this last question, which talks about data protecting in the ecosystem, is the one that is covered by an information security program of the organization. Because in general, they protect all sorts of data. So personal data also comes under that ambit. But the other 7 or 8 elements that we spoke about, they do not get covered in an information security program. Hence, we require a privacy program for that. Next slide, please. Thank you. So summing it up, I mentioned that we have data subject rights, we have principles of data privacy, which I will try and recap very quickly. These are the core governance pieces that we have to be mindful of when we are designing a privacy program. Okay, we can pick any data protection bill, pick up India, Singapore, Australia, GDPR even. All of them are largely based on these principles. So for data subject rights, some of them we already covered. The right to confirmation and access, which means that I can go up to an organization and ask them, are you having my data? If you're having my data, what are you using it for? Okay. The right to correction and erasure, we spoke about it. Right to data portability. So you have every right to decide whether your data can be migrated from one data fiduciary to another. You have every right to instruct an organization to be forgotten. Again, there are caveats here as the law permits, because a lot of them has to comply with the laws of the land. So a criminal cannot go and tell an organization, you cannot have my data, because then there is legal boundary there. Okay. So all of them come with some caveats, but overall I'm trying to explain the construct within which it is built. You have the rights to grievance redressal. You can go up to the government and authorities appointed by the government and raise a grievance on if your private data has been handled unjustly and not in accordance with the law. Then based on this, there are some principles that form in the data privacy construct, right? One is purpose and collection limitation. So you cannot collect data more than what is required. The collection has to be fair and reasonable, and it can only be collected to the extent necessary for purposes of processing that data. Privacy notice has to be issued to the data subject, including the purpose of processing, nature and categories of the personal data that you're collecting. Okay. Quality of personal data that you maintain within the organization has to be complete, accurate, and it cannot be misleading. Data retention, again, you can retain the data only for the period necessary for the purpose for which it was processed. Beyond that, if you have to retain it, you need further consent from the data subject, and of course it has to be compliant with the law that is at present in effect in your country. Accountability is another big one. So data fiduciaries, they are responsible for complying with the laws of the land under this privacy program. So combining your data subject rights and the principles of data privacy, organizations have come up with a set of obligations that they must fulfill, and that is the foundation of your privacy program. So privacy by design, similar to security by design, I'm sure you relate to that. Transparently declaring the process of collecting, processing, all of that has to be transparent. And the authority has given the power to prescribe regulations to govern the manner of how this information has to be made available to the data subject rights. Security safeguards, again, this is a big one because this is where security overlaps, or your ISMS overlaps with the PIMS system. So data processors and data fiduciaries, which are controllers, have to implement security standards and practices. There can be different ways of doing it, maybe a way in which you de-identify with the data, encryption techniques, obfuscation, data obfuscation, masking, all of that. I'm sure you know the different ways in which you can secure the data in your organization. All of that has to be extended to private data as well. Notification of breach. Now, this is a very interesting one. This and the next one, which is appointment of the DPO. Notification of breach became very prominent after GDPR came into our lives. Okay, so before that, there was not much importance given to breach notification, and that is where a lot of companies were absconding and were not held accountable for the breaches that happened, and hence the callous attitudes. So all the data fiduciaries are required to mandatorily report data breach within up to 72 hours to the authority. That has to be done. And data protection officer appointment was also something that became very prominent after the GDPR. They are supposed to appoint a data protection officer who has to be a senior level, and in some countries the data protection officer has to be a local. So if it is an Indian law, the person has to be based out of India. Data protection, impact assessments, and data audits, they are very similar to how we do it in the security world. Impact assessment translates to risk assessments, data audits translates to your information security, internal and external audit. And similar to ISMS, compliance certificate mechanisms are available. You can get certified separately on 27701 as well. Okay, so having said all of that, the top two that are being debated right now is on the rights of cross-border data transfers, where sensitive data can only be transferred outside of a certain country with the explicit consent of a data principal. This is again a debate everywhere in most of the laws. Data localization is something that is highly debatable right now in India, where the government is saying that a copy of all sensitive personal data must be stored in India and critical data should only be processed in India. And again, this is taken by the China law of PIPL and of course GDPR from the EU. So this is all I wanted to say. I want to sum it up with the next slide, Sirish. Yeah, thank you. So these are some of the lovely overlaps that we have. As Sirish mentioned, that the base has to be 27001, upon top of which you build the 27701 standards. My opinions on certain things are that we must drive the information security and privacy programs separately. They have different objectives, as we spoke of, different ways of implementation. In fact, they're oceans and they take the maturity level and the optimization of both the programs take some time. They have very important overlapping elements. So those can be the ones that can be done conjointly. You should have a data privacy framework within which you want to work. Okay, you can have, of course, ISO 27701, which we're speaking about. There is a NIST, there is DSCI, British Standard 10012, based on which GDPR is evolved. The third is knowing your kingdom, simple as asset inventory trackers, right? Knowing your kingdom is very important. There is an old saying, or rather, there is a saying in this movie called Lion King. I'm a big fan of that movie, so I've taken that reference. I hope you've seen that one. It's a beautiful one. It says that everything the light touches is our kingdom. Similarly, every asset that your private data is held on comes under the ambit of privacy program. So follow the personal data and do a good job of mapping the data flow. Your initial work is done very well. Based on that nature of data and the type of transaction and assets, you build in controls according to the laws of the land. That's very important. Now, you not only have to build data to monitor unauthorized data, remember, you also have to have contingencies for monitoring authorized activities. So your logs, wherever you apply logs, they have to be more descriptive and you have to restrict personal data outlets. Very important. And it can't be said enough, as your ISMS incident management systems has to be strong. Similarly, a very strong incident management team has to be set up to handle privacy data breaches. Right from notification to building a chain of events to securing evidences that has to be presented to the authorities, all of that has to be bundled in a very tight case. It has to be done right and it has to be done within 72 hours. So how well you do that, that gets you the price points on whether you get a penalty, and if you get a penalty, how much penalty you get. Just like information security, it is not restricted to the information security geeks alone. This one has to be with a lot of involvement with leadership and all the business teams. So primarily business teams, legal, HR, employee relations, all of them have to come together to build a privacy program. Again, all of what I have said is not specific to a country's law. It is general common sense things that we will need to consider when we are building a privacy program in our organization. So I hope this was fruitful. I will pass it on again to Sirish to sum it up at the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Shilpa. Yeah, that was great. And I will pick it up again from where you have left very nicely, where you say all hands on deck. And I think that is basically the principle of any management system. You know, at the end of the day, when we implement 27001 information security and then privacy, and as Shilpa rightly put, that they both need to be implemented separately, and you need to have the basic framework of 27001 in place when you do that or you start that. but you need to involve everybody in the organization. And we all know that management systems are very holistic in nature, and they basically ensure or help in the organization to demonstrate, its commitment towards various privacy regulations, the contract data, customer data, information security. So it helps, and all the stakeholders basically develop a lot of trust, and it boosts the confidence that yes, there is a method in place, there is a system in place which is helping the organization. And we also all know from our experience that management systems are not something which, are completely foolproof. And the day you implement and get certified means nothing is going to go wrong. No, it is a continual improvement system. So all our learnings over a period of time get captured in the management system, and it helps us becoming better over a period of time. So surely it demonstrates commitment much beyond just lip service from an organization. And that is where I will again say, all hands on deck, because right from the top management to the person down on the ground, everybody has to walk the talk, and it should be seen. So it has to be demonstrable commitment. The word that I really love in management systems, it says demonstrable commitment. So you should be able to demonstrate. Helps identify and mitigate risk to client data and in turn to the business. If client data is impacted, your business is impacted. Overall, improve the efficiencies and provide a secure environment, meet the industry standards. Once you have a management system framework in place, you can integrate the various industry standards into it, and also keep adding as a part of the continual improvement. It ensures that you have a due diligence with regard to all the regulatory requirements, and create at the end of the day a more viable, sustainable supply chain by creating appropriate influences. So this is what it provides you. Now, when we look at privacy management system 2019 standard, we know it basically defines the PIMS for you, and to enable to have that kind of a management system uh, platform in place. And you also need to demonstrate compliance to 27001, that is information security, if you want to get certified to privacy management. So that becomes a baseline. The privacy information management system standard starts in its introduction by saying it is an extension to the information security standard, because we have seen in this presentation today how easily one gets into the other and how they are linked and correlated. So that foundation of security is important. And the key principle for 27701 is to determine that the organization, whether they are a processor of data or a controller, or even both for that matter. And we know one thing with both these standards, 27001 and 27701, that there is an annex of controls given to you. This is something very unique to these standards. Even if you look at information security, it gives you more than 100 controls, which will reduce in the new release of 2022, but the basic control structure will remain. And the same is with 27701. In Annex A, it tells you about what the controller should do. Annex B tells you what the processor should do. So it also helps you make that framework, and you know what is applicable to you. Okay, so this is where these standards really stand out from many other standards. Now, having said what we have said with regard to security and privacy, we'll just in a single slide take a quick glimpse at what is coming up in the 2022 standard, where the final draft international standard is already available, and it is currently still undergoing the voting process till the end of September. So only after October, so by November we should, or early December, we should have the 2022 standard released, because we don't expect much changes from the FDIs. Now, some of the things that have come up in the standard, the first thing is threat intelligence. We all know that ISO standards do not come out with anything path breaking. It's not something new that they present to us. It is something that is happening across the industry. But when the ISO committee feels that this is something that needs to be promoted and brought out to a wider audience, it becomes part of the ISO standard. And that is where it helps, because it gives that baseline to everybody. So threat intelligence is one thing which it is adding. where you can collect, analyze threat data, and also create a structure around it. Information security in project management. Now, project management always had a methodology in place, but here you are introducing information security. Like in one of the earlier slides, I said that software development methodology already has security now built in. So we talk of secure development, and that is something where people are getting trained and what should be done to ensure that a tool or a software is secure. Same way for project management methodology, where we are introducing that. And also information security in the current ICT supply chain, where we are using multiple products and also having a huge stakeholder network around us. So we need to ensure that there is information security controls there. Privacy and protection of PII, I think we've spoken enough. This was part of compliance as far as the 2013 standard is concerned. Now in the 2022 standard, it comes as an organizational control. So that is the basic change. And the requirement largely remains same and links to privacy management. User and endpoint devices, yes, a technology control which talks of all kind of endpoint devices which collect your data or which store your data, which need to be protected. Eventually, we also need to consider our IoT devices into this, because there are a lot of those additional devices which are being used, which may not always be hardened, because we are interacting with a lot of these stakeholders, and that is where we need to understand as to what we are integrating into our system. It may be sitting on the edge, but we do not know what capabilities it has to intrude. Then data masking and data leakage protection is also brought into the gamut of standards. So data masking, again, they are talking of a very topic specific policy that is there with regard to data masking. And data leakage protection and web filtering is something we have always been doing in many companies. And we are also restricting certain websites from being accessed so that there is no malicious code that gets introduced. So this is what the new things that are coming up. Also, just before I close on this, the new standard also now clubs the various controls that are there, like more than 100 controls we had in 2013. In 2022, they're going to be less than 100. And they are going to be clubbed under only 4 titles, that is organizational controls, technology controls, physical controls, and people controls. So everything will get bunched under that, and it will get more aligned where there is no duplication, plus some additional points for us to think. So anyway, I think this is enough for today as far as new standard is concerned, just to tell you how it links to what we were talking today. And we will surely discuss this in some other webinar after the standard is released and we have sufficient information available on that. So I think with that, we can end this, and over to you, Pallavi.
Thank you, Shirish. Thank you so much. And thanks, Shilpa. The floor is open for questions. Any questions that you have, please start sending in and we will take them one by one. Okay, our first question for the day is how can an individual protect himself from privacy breaches?
Shilpa, you want to take it?
Okay, so like I said, today not much can be done by an individual, and that is exactly why there are laws in every country that is trying to build that framework for the individuals. What we can do is limit your IoT devices, turn off the mic as far as possible. See, just because you're sitting near the phone and you're not speaking on the phone does not mean that the phone is not listening in. If you have given mic permissions to certain apps, they're always listening in, similar to your Alexas or Siris, right? So be very careful in those permissions. There are different kinds of permissions. There are standard permissions that an app requires to function. Then there are discretionary permissions, which they don't share with third-party cookies. And then there are dangerous permissions. So your app cameras, your microphone, sensitive information that usually you would not share, which they are asking for permission to share those with third party cookies. So all of these are different levels of permissions that they themselves, an Android platform or an iOS platform, they themselves categorize them. So it is totally on you how you do it. Today, because we in some countries privacy policy is not applicable, we are not able to get these people to book, in the sense that they do not have this liability to not ask certain permissions when they are not required. So they tend to ask certain permissions even when they are not required. If you don't give those permissions, you're not unable to use the app. I'm sure you've seen that. So in today's scenario, in countries where the laws are not there and people are not falling hard on them, it's very less that we can do, but accept all your web ecosystem and your phone ecosystem, you have to be extremely careful of the permissions that you give. That is the only thing I can say right now.
Thanks, Shilpa. Thank you so
Right,
much. I think
right,
brilliant.
right. I think just to
Okay.
add to what Shilpa said, also individuals, like she also covered this in her presentation. Plus, individuals today, other than working out to interact with various devices and various applications, we are also looking at globally at a concept called as a smart city concept, where various citizens of a particular country or a particular city would interact with various government applications, and also these would be eventually deployed. The government in any country cannot do everything, so these would be deployed through various third-party vendors. So that is where again a new challenge is going to come to individuals like us who are going to interact with this system, and that may be the only system many a times being applicable. So yes, this will pose another challenge. So we have to wait for various countries to have their legislations in place to protect us. Otherwise, the individual does get exposed. Yeah, thank you. Over to you, Pallavi.
Thanks, Shirish. Thanks, Shilpa. So our next question is, what are all the precautionary measures for cybersecurity that need to be implemented in organizations working from multiple locations?
Yeah, I think for this, whether you're working from a single location or multiple locations in a IT-enabled world where we are talking of security, it really does not make much difference because we are always on the network and we are accessing systems of other people and also allowing various customers and stakeholders to get into our system through authorized access too. So, what we need to start now, I'll tell you the challenge that happens is for us as individuals or as professionals also to imagine what could be the threat matrix that we are working in. So, when you establish an information security system and you have taken care of, you have used the ISO 27000 standard, 27001 standard, you have a statement of applicability in place, you've done all the risk analysis. Now, what happens with multiple offices is that in today's times, these offices may not always be all, very established kind of organization. Post COVID, what has happened is you may have just one or two people in a certain country who have specialist skills, and they log in only from there. Some of them could be fully work from home kind of employees who log in or experts. So those kind of challenges need to be considered by an organization when you design the system. And on top of that, this is now moving towards everything is moving on the cloud. So that gives an additional facet for the organizations to imagine. Today, when we say, that I have a person sitting somewhere in Poland, maybe, and accessing my system, at the same time, that same system can be accessed by some team leader sitting here. So when we are auditing or when we are designing these kind of systems or trying to understand, it becomes very challenging for us to exactly define those controls. So in that framework that you have designed or defined, you will have to keep considering these risks that are there and keep improvising upon how those accesses need to be managed or how those controls need to be defined in a way that we are able to put those firewalls correctly. So yes, if you ask me personally, there is a great challenge here, and it is going to keep on increasing. So we will have to be on our toes and keep improving our system. Yeah, thank you, Pallavi.
Thanks, Shirish. So our next question is, how do we integrate 27001 and 27701, and what are the benefits of this integration?
Yes, actually, when it comes to management systems, I think something that happened way back in
Was I audible?
2011 was, sorry,
Sorry, I just lost
yeah,
audio for a
Pallavi?
second. Sorry, I lost
No, no
lost
problem.
audio for a second, so I wasn't sure if you heard the question.
Sure, sure, I heard it. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Now, as far as integrating management systems is concerned, I think ISO itself recognized this that organizations eventually need to have a common management system, or at least the core needs to be common. And this was recognized by ISO much before. And in 2011 itself, it released what is called as Annex SL. And we all means the work must have started 3 years before that. But we all know that all our current standards are based on Annex SL. And what does Annex SL give us? It gives us a common framework. So we know that we have those standard clauses that it gives us, which are similar in all standards, and then it gives us more controls. So by doing this, ISO itself is promoting the idea of having integrated management systems. The one thing that we all should remember when we integrate management systems is we should not lose focus of what every standard is trying to achieve. So if I'm integrating information security and privacy, and if I have been more comfortable and have been implementing information security for a longer period of time, there is a tendency for me to stay stuck there and only bring those elements of privacy which I understand or I can easily implement. But the whole idea of privacy management as a different focus area is to cover all the aspects. So we should surely integrate our management systems. It is easy for an organization to manage the systems. But over a period of time, we should not lose focus on what both or different standards are trying to achieve. And that is what I see in organizations. They come up with 27001, then because they want to go in for privacy, they get certified to that. And then over a period of time, they will integrate both. They will not start with integration because then one of the standards may lose focus. And that is how they integrate the management systems. Yeah. Thank you. Over to you, Pallavi.
Thank you, Shirish. Okay, maybe this question is more for Shilpa. What is the role of top management to create awareness among employees and other stakeholders on cybersecurity and threat measures?
Okay. It is the same for privacy as well as security. I think more for the top management, it is important to recognize the problem. Okay, we as ourselves, what we do is we have a set of objectives. We don't scale it and look at the threat landscape more often. It is very important to set our objectives based on the threat landscape today, and once we do that, it is very very important for the management to equally be involved in the development of those implementations. When we see our leaders speak, when we see our top management give us directions, be more involved in the implementations, we then are able to give that confidence to our individuals that we are going in the right direction. There are so in organizations where there is a lot of hierarchy, right? There are different levels. The communication somewhere gets lost. It is more like a Chinese whisper where the management is trying to say something and the end deliverable or whatever the end analyst receives is something else. So that is exactly why the management has to be more visible. It has to be more approachable, open to feedbacks, and even from the bottommost tier of the organization. And that is exactly where a proper 360 cycle can be developed, where the management listens to everybody and then incorporates those feedbacks accordingly. So management direction, very very important in any management system that you build always. Thank you.
Thank you, Shilpa. Thank you so much. Okay, maybe just the last two questions for the day. Whether we can integrate ISO 9001, 14001, and 27001 as a combined management system, and can we have a combined audit for all these three at a time?
Interesting. Yeah, I'm interacting with organizations today where they already have 9, 14, and 45. So in quality, environment, safety. Then they added energy management to it. So they have 4 standards integrated into one. And now they have started working on 27001. So the general approach that organizations are taking, where these three standards are there, more so in the manufacturing industry, where my experience with such kind of integration is there, they are keeping the ICT standards separate. The reason being, the team that is working on these ICT standards like 27001, 20 or privacy is different from the rest of the team which manages the implementation in manufacturing. So they are keeping the two separate and they are not integrating it. But organizations which are largely IT organizations, which have mostly services related to IT or IT enabled services, there if they have gone for say environmental management, quality is basic, it can integrate with anything. But there if they have gone for environment and safety, then this would be restricted to environmental management system applicable to office-based activities and also safety to office-based activity. So in this case, you can probably integrate ICT standards, but still, where I have seen this in big BPOs and KPOs, they have not done so. They've kept the two separate. 9001 does get integrated because it is related to service delivery and product directly and the outcome to the customer. So there they get in information security and this, but the EHS they keep again separate. But you can do it in the example, second example that I gave, in a factory-based, manufacturing-based environment, it is difficult because the focus of manufacturing environment and safety impact is completely different from an IT. So it's more challenging there. There cannot be a clear yes or no here. It is the approach we take. Yeah. Over to you, Pallavi.
Thank you, Shirish. Okay, so last question is maybe for our next webinar, but I'll still go ahead and put it out there. So how should we implement the controls in the new ISO 27002 standard for a new company?
I think if your company is new and you're already currently working on information security, I would still recommend you to take the existing standard and start with it. You get later on a transition period of nearly 3 years. It is still not declared by accreditation bodies. We are expecting 3 years, 2 or 3 years, but the general practice for ISO standard transitions has been 3 years. So we can expect that. So once you have an established information security management system, to do a transition to the new standard will not be very challenging because your basics would already be in place. You would have a team in place. You'll have the whole structure top down with the management involved. And also you would have the control mechanism and risk management in place because those elements are not changing. So if you're starting today or you're already on the journey, continue with 27001 2013, complete it in the next 5, 6, 8 months, and then maybe look at doing the transition because you will still have time to do that. Yeah, because we still don't have the standard. The standard would be coming out in end November, December. We need some time to understand the implications because there are a lot of new terminologies that have come. So to build that matrix will take time. Auditors will take time to learn. Organizations would take time. So there will be a 6-month gap when you start implementing it. So might as well start with what you have and then do the transition. It's possible. Yeah, over to you, Pallavi.
Thank you, Shirish. So I think we are done for the questions for the day. There are a few questions. We will be able to answer them or post the webinar over an email. So thank you so much for your questions today. Special thanks to you, Shilpa and Shirish, for such a wonderful session. I'm sure everybody enjoyed it. So thanks again. Thank you for everybody who joined us today. Have a great day. Have a great evening.
Thank you, team. Thank you for having me in.
Thank you.